Hi, welcome back to Taji's World of Books, and this is my weekly reading wrap-up. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, and this is my weekly reading wrap-up where I give you a recap of all the books that I read this week. So this week I dove into the Grishaverse, and so I read all the books in the Grishaverse, and I'll do that wrap-up this time. The only book that I will not include in this wrap-up will be The Rule of Wolves, as I'm halfway through it right now, so I think I might film that video tomorrow and then do it as a part 2 and just review that particular book. But I have done what I've done in the past, which is I've already filmed some pre-clips for the first 5 books in the series, so I'll go ahead and insert that now. So everybody is like preparing for the Shadow and Bones trilogy that is going to be, the adaptation is going to be airing on Netflix. I believe the date is April 23rd. These books have been on my shelf for some time now, and so I said, what better time than to dive into the Grishaverse than now, since I've got to get prepared for the 23rd release, and so that's what I've done. So let me go ahead and give you my thoughts, and let me say this, I'm in the middle of finishing the Crooked Kingdom right now, so I'll insert that later on. But let me go ahead and say that I'm going to say some unpopular things from the very beginning. And that is, I absolutely loved the Shadow and Bones trilogy. I did not expect to love it as much as I did. I was all in from book 1 through book 3. I loved it, loved it, loved it. Maybe I loved it so much because I'm willing to concede that I may have loved it because I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. I was expecting to go in it and be like, okay, it's all right. It's another fantasy, romance. It has a romance element, but it's another like YA fantasy type situation, and so I'm not going to be into it as much as I was. Guess what? I was so wrong. I loved it so much. What's interesting, and I'm going to talk about these in a minute, what's interesting is that I was expecting to love this more than I loved this, and I didn't. Everybody has told me that I have spoken to about this, that the Six of Crows and the Crooked Kingdom is much better than the Shadow and Bones, that it's more action-packed and that it's more involved, and I'm just really going to love it. And I didn't. So we're going to talk about that. So I don't know, maybe I'm strange. Okay, so let me go ahead and first say that I read these according to the Grishaverse, as I wanted to maximize the reading experience. So the first book that I read in the series, no, I didn't. The first book that they recommend that you read is The Demon in the Woods. However, as I did my research, they said you probably should read the first book in the series, Shadow and Bone, first, so that you have an idea, or that short novella, The Demon in the Woods, will make more sense to you. So that's what I went ahead and did. So let me start with the Shadow and Bones series. And I don't know, the world building, like I really loved Alina Starkov. I did all of this in audiobook. So the narrator was amazing. She was wonderful. I loved the dynamic between her and the Darkling. I loved the building of the Grisha and understanding the Grisha. I loved her relationship with Mal. I loved trying to like understand and discern like what's going on between her. I think Alina and the Darkling have a very complicated history and a very complicated dynamic, and so I really wanted to try to understand who the Darkling was and what this power is that she has and everything that was unfolding. I just absolutely loved. Alina is an orphan girl who grew up in an orphanage with that was like, basically she felt alone and isolated, and she doesn't start to really come alive until Mal joins the orphanage. And when he joins the orphanage, they become best buddies and they get into all kinds of antics and things together. And so you kind of learn about that as you learn about their relationship. But the book really starts off as Alina as, 17 years old, Mal is 17 years old, and they are being conscripted into the army because everybody sort of has to do their service in the army at a certain age. And so what happens when you're a child is that you're tested by the Grisha to determine if you have certain powers. And if you have certain powers, then you're sent to this really lavish palace, and that's where you train to be, the little palace, where you train to hone and fine-tune your powers to become a Grisha. And Grishas have different types of powers, that they control different elements, in essence. Okay, so she is tested, and it's determined that she doesn't have a power. So she is sent to be into the army, and she becomes a cryptographer, and Mal is like a soldier in the army. And the story really takes off from there. And I don't want to give away too much spoilers. You guys have probably already read this and probably already know, but something happens when they go out into there's this area in this world and I love that she gives you these beautiful maps, right? And so a lot of stuff happens in this dark zone right here, right? And so they basically are living in this area, and when they have to go in on a mission into this dark territory, and I forget what they call it the Fold. That's what it is. This is called the Fold. And the Fold was created, and it's where monsters and all these evil things exist. So Alina and her cryptographer group and, soldiers and all that venture into the Fold on a mission, and something happens, and as a result, the story really unfolds from there. And I loved what Leigh Bardugo did with this book. I loved it. Like I said, I loved the relationship between the characters. I loved Alina's relationship with Mal. I loved Alina's relationship with the Darkling. I wanted to know more about him. I just loved it. It was amazing. It was one of the best books that I've read this year. So I was really, really happy and really pleased with this. Okay, so as I said, I read Shadow and Bone, and so then after I read that, then I was like, let me go back, and so then I read The Demon in the Wood, and The Demon in the Wood is basically understanding the Darkling. It's like understanding what happened. It's the backstory between... Now, the thing that was a little bit of a challenge for me, it was, is that it basically is before he was the Darkling, he was just a lonely boy with his mother. And so then it gives you the understanding behind why he became who he was. So I really did like that. However, I wish Leigh Bardugo would have fleshed it out a little bit more, because I feel like there's so much, and of course this is only a snapshot and a snippet into what happened with him, but I would have loved to see that really was like fleshed out a little bit more, because I want to know more about what happened to him that hardened him and made him become, because he has a hard exterior, but inside, I think there's potential for love and goodness, right? I don't know. So, at any rate, so I read The Demon in the Wood, and that's only available on ebook. And guys, just so you know, little plug, little side note, I read it on ebook, and I had Alexa read it to me. And Alexa does a really good job in terms of her inflections and emotions. It's not a robotic, like automaton type voice. Like it really is. Of course, it's not as good as like a real actor that's like giving you all the emotion. But for what it is, I felt like it did the job for those pages. Like it was like a 70-page novella, something like that. So I was really pleased with that. Okay, so then the next thing that I read was The Witch of Duva. So this is a collection of short stories that is a companion novel to all of the Grishaverse, right? And these are the stories, and I love that Leigh Bardugo basically said when she was approached to create some novellas for the Grishaverse, she basically said, she struggled, right, to come up with, like, how do I do these novellas, and, like, what is this going to look like, and what should I say? And I think yeah, her publisher asked if she could write a prequel story for Shadow and Bones. And she said, I was all down, I was all in for it, but then she was like, what am I going to do? And she said, so in essence, I came up with these tales, and these are tales basically that all of the characters in the Grishaverse would have heard and experienced as children. And so they're really based on like Hansel and Gretel, or the Hans Christian Andersen's, sort of his fairy tales. And so that's what basically these stories are. And so when you're hearing in these books, they talk about the little fox. The little fox is told in this story as a fairy tale and a cautionary tale, the Too Clever Fox, as a cautionary tale that children are told that live in the Grishaverse. So let me first of all, before I even talk about this, comment on how beautiful this book is. And you can't tell, but it's textured. So it has a wonderful sort of texture to it. And I don't often comment on the beauty of books, but this book, I loved it because it harkened me back to childhood. And look at that. That's the inside cover. Like, it's so gorgeous. I loved it. I absolutely love it. And I don't often comment on how much I love the feel and the look of books, but this, when I got this in the mail, I was like, Leigh, girl, you have brought it. And then, I was like, ooh, texture. And then I like looked at the inside cover and I was like, ooh, this is gorgeous and it's textured and I love the gold foil. And then I opened it up and I was like, oh my God, this harkened me back to the days of when I was a child. And I loved reading so much. And I remember very clearly transitioning from picture books. Look at that. From picture books to like regular books that we read now that don't have pictures. And I remember feeling so sad. And my teacher telling me like, oh, you're a big girl now and like you don't have to have pictures anymore. Like you can read the story yourself and, create the pictures in your mind. And I was like, but I want the pictures. Look at that. It's so beautiful. And so I have to say, like, I was not expecting to love this book as much as I did. And in here is... And actually, I read them according to the way that it says on Goodreads, like as a part of the Grishaverse. So, and you get your little table of contents here. And so I then read The Witch of Duva, but you don't have to read, you can read these stories at any time. And every story in here, it's the same narrator, Laura Fortgang, and she does an amazing job. And I absolutely loved, I think maybe my favorite story in here, I don't know, I loved them all. The Too Clever Fox was amazing. The Little Knife was amazing. The Soldier and the Prince. When water sang fire, which is like a mermaid story in here, that's a cautionary tale. And I love that everything sort of takes place in the same Grishaverse. So like if you're confused about where things are happening, all you have to do is get out your map and take a look and you can see where they are in the Grishaverse. So again, don't sleep on this. Go ahead and get this because it really does add another layer of complexity to the story. Okay, so then I moved on to Storm and Siege. I am not going to go into the detail of this story because it is, it's a continuation, and if you haven't read it, I don't want to spoil it for you, but there's a track across the sea. They are hunting these different, sort of like, it made me think of Harry Potter and the Horcrux. Like, remember the Horcrux when they were sort of tracking Horcrux? So they're tracking like similar types of magical objects. And I love, again, like you can see, like, here's the true sea, here's the thing that they're looking for, there's some new characters that are introduced, and again, it is just absolute, there's some angst going on in here, because you don't know, in terms of love interest, what's happening with that there's a development of further character and further arcs that are happening. Alina is figuring out who she is. Like, it just is amazing. I was so happy. And then the final culmination, I loved how she ended it. I loved the direction things went. I sort of felt for every single character in the book, I there's a lot of spoilers. I don't want to go into it if you haven't read it. It just delivered in so many ways. I was so pleased and so happy and so thrilled that I did this, and I'm excited to go into the Netflix adaptation. So the thing to know about the Netflix adaptation, my understanding is what they're going to do is they're going to combine the Six of Crows and the Crooked Kingdom with the Shadow and Bone series. So they're going to basically merge them. And I could kind of see how they would do that. I'm anticipating, I haven't watched the trailer yet. The trailer is out. Haven't watched it yet because I want to finish off this part of the series before I do that. I could see that they probably would, Alina and her crew are working to save the planet from the Darkling, right? And then in the midst of that, you've got this other element, and they need to go on their prison break to get out this character or this scientist that basically has developed this drug that is going to empower the Grisha, but at the same time hook them tremendously on this substance, and it can be very damaging and deadly to the Grisha if this is not discovered. And whichever government has control of that drug then has control over all of the Grisha, and they become very powerful and very dangerous, but also very destructive to the Grisha as well. So I think of it sort of like heroin is the drug that, because it becomes one taste and they become hopelessly addicted to it in most situations. Some people it takes two, but one time. And whatever power the Grisha holds is amplified and then some by this drug. And it was really discovered really quite accidentally. And that's what this book is about. And so I think the Netflix adaptation is going to combine those two, and I could see a seamless way that they do that. Okay, so let's talk about Six of Crows. What I love about this book, and I wanted to go into it loving it, right? Like I wanted to go into it loving it the way that I did Shadow and Bones. And for the most part, I did, but if I were to rank them, Shadow and Bones is my favorite, and then Six of Crows comes. What I loved about this, the cast of characters, the absolute cast of characters that are in the audiobook, they did an amazing job casting these narrators. So it's Lauren Fortgang, it's the narrator from Sarah J. Maas's The Throne of Glass, I forget her name, I absolutely love her. It is Fred Berman, and Fred Berman does all of the Sherilyn Kenyon voices in her Dark Hunter series, and so I really am used to his voice, and I love his voice as well. And so I can't remember all the narrators but basically all the narrators are very, very good at what they do, and they're very, they bring the characters alive. I love Cass, and I love what Cass does, and so basically, it's set in the Grishaverse. It's set in the same world. You do not have the same characters that you have in the Shadow and Bone series. You don't even hear about them until the Crooked Kingdom book, and you actually hear about Zoya and you hear about Jenya. So these are completely different characters, and it really takes place in Ketterdam. And so in essence, you've got a host of characters. So you have a convict, you have a sharpshooter, you have a runaway, you have a spy, you have a heartrender. A heartrender is a Grisha who is able to go in and stop the heart of someone just by sheer thought alone. And then you have a thief. And so they basically are approached by this character, this guy named Van Eck. I think it's Van Eck is his name. So they're approached by Van Eck, and Van Eck basically says, you and your gang and your crew, basically, that run the barrel in Ketterdam, the section of really by the docks in Ketterdam. Your crew, we need you to pull off one of the greatest heists ever. And that heist would be to break into this maximum security prison and break out this scientist because he's in Fjordan, and he has created, here's in Fjorda, this drug, and we need it. And so they go on the heist. They go basically to pull off this almost unsurvivable task. And the story is told from there. And so it is action packed. It is fast paced. It was in the middle. I sort of felt a little bit bored, really, in the story and development. But as it ended, the ending is what really took the rating for me up from a 4 to a 4.75. So again, it's not bad. I loved it. It was really great, but I just came off the high of Shadow and Bones, which I loved. And then I went into this and I was hoping to love it in as much as I did, and it was okay. I mean, I still loved it. Don't get me wrong, but it was not like the Shadow and Bones. Okay, so that is all I have to say. I'm going to go back to the main clip, and then we can hear the rest of what I thought with the culmination of Crooked Kingdom. Okay, so now you heard my thought on those books all the way up through Six of Crows. So now I'm going to go in and talk about the Crooked Kingdom, which is the second book it's the second book in respect to the Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom go together, but it's really the sixth book, I think, in the series. And so this is the continuation of Kaz and his crew's story. Kaz Brecker and they've gone on this heist, and they had to break someone out of prison, and that was the Six of Crows stories. And so at the end of Six of Crows, it ended on a cliffhanger. Something happens, and now it has to come to a culmination in Crooked Kingdom. I am not going to go into too much detail about this book because it is a culmination of everything that happened in the first story, or in the Six of Crows. So it's sort of a wrap up, and they go on another mission and have to combat against the evil, and we find out what happened in Chaz's past and in everybody else's past. And so, all I'm going to say about this is that I was told that Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom was more exciting and definitely a better read than the Shadow and Bone series, and I did not find that to be so. I found this book to be very underwhelming. I didn't like how it ended. I felt like it left a lot to be said, and I felt unfulfilled. The relationships weren't fleshed out in the way that I wanted them to be. As a romance reader, I tend to like relationships more, and I think this was more fleshed out in terms of the plot and the heist and the battle and fighting against evil, and the dynamic of the adventure is more what this was about. And I'm not going to say it was bad, but it just wasn't what I was looking for. And so for me, I struggled between giving this a 3-star and a 4-star. Would I read this again? Probably not. I still absolutely loved Shadow and Bones, but this didn't do it for me. I was bored. So then I moved into the King of Scars, and the King of Scars is the next book in the series, and we sort of left Ketterdam. So that's where Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom takes place in the Grishaverse, in the city of Ketterdam, and Kaz and all of the cast of crews. And now we come, and this is King Nikolai's story. And I liked this in the sense that it brought back Nikolai, and we find out that Nikolai was basically imbued with some of the Darkling's power, and he was turned into a demon, if you will, that was part of the fold in the Shadow and Bone series, and we get to see what happens to Nikolai as a result of that. I like that it brings back Zoya in this story, and David and Jenya, and so you see them all coming together to try to help save Ravka, their kingdom. And so again, this is an interesting story. I thought it was well done, but it didn't give me everything that I wanted. I felt like it was missing some things. It didn't flesh out the relationships in quite the same way. Like, I loved hearing about, so we get to see, what's her name? Nina in this story. So Nina we all know what happened to Nina in Crooked Kingdom. So we saw something happen with Nina, and Nina then is fighting for her king and for Ravka in this story, and she is going back to Fjerda to be a spy. And so I think the story is building up, and I'm seeing it all come together in the Rule of Wolves. And the Rule of Wolves is like delivering in the way that I want. You've got the relationships, you've got the intrigue, you've got like court dynamics, and you started to see the court dynamics coming up with all the different kingdoms. So you see that we've got the Fjordans fighting against the Ravkins and the Shu. They all are they're wanting this drug that allows them to control the Grisha. Once you get them hooked on the Jura Parim, then you can control the Grisha, and so all of the governments are fighting against it, are fighting to control the Jura Parim, and we find out that Jura Parim is made in the Novazien, and so it's all developing and it's coming together, and I think it's going to come to a culmination in the Rule of Wolves, but I think this is one more step towards that. So I'm excited. Again, I was there, but it like just would missed a little something, and I'm getting it in Rule of Wolves. So again, the way this ends is tragic, and the way that it ends, you're just like, what just happened? So that like sucked you all in. You were like, I need to get the next book to find out what the heck just happened, because I don't, like, you're like looking going, what, how did you do that? And so again, it's all like that world building that like comes to this high culmination in the Rule of Wolves. And so, like I said, I'm halfway through it, and I think I'm gonna do the I'm gonna review that and do that as part 2. But all in all, I have to say, I am super excited for show or adaptation for Shadow of Bone. And that's going to be the combination of Shadow and Bone and the Six of Crows, which I think is a perfect way to do it. I think those two stories are going to deliver and then some. It has kind of like a Game of Thrones feel in that you've got the dragons that we see in the Shadowfold. And so I'm very, very excited for it. I'm happy that I did this read and this, deep dive into the Grishaverse and did it in the way that I have in preparation for that show, so that it's all fresh in my mind. And so all in all, this has been a great ride, but I'm still going to say, until I finish the Rule of Wolves, I still am going to say Shadow Bones is like my OG. Like, I absolutely loved it. She did a great job, and I'm super happy with it. And so that is all that I have for today. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and remember, I upload new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and if you would please do me a favor and like and subscribe, that helps me support my channel. I would be greatly appreciative, and I look forward to seeing you all in my next video.